Okay, and just so you know, Kevin, I know Casey really well, so you and your wife and Casey and anyone else who wants to come can come with us to Italy. Um, so I'll go ahead and get started. So the funny thing is that Kevin and I had both planned on doing two separate presentations, and then he quickly realized that ours fit so well together. So I'm going to start us off, and what I'll do is I'll basically go for the first 30 minutes, and then he'll jump in, and what he has to say is going to be fantastic, and it's going to piggyback right on the tail end of my presentation. So what I'll be doing is I'll be kind of starting with the foundation, the philosophy, trying to build that whole classroom visit system and the importance of it and how to do it. And I'll be giving you some strategies and tools. But then when he jumps in, he's really going to get into the implementation and give you some great tools and just really practical tools to help you make the most of those classroom visits for instructional coaching. Okay, so let me just start out by saying that, as principals, we really bear that burden of responsibility to improve the quality of instruction. And with that burden of responsibility, you've got to get into classrooms. We all know that, right? There's not anybody that's going to say, getting into classrooms is not important. However, the effectiveness of those classroom visits depends not on doing them or not doing them. It's having clarity, purpose, and an intentional plan. And being able to balance those purposes is what really can make a difference between if you're leveraging your classroom visits to improve your school or if you're just wasting your time, frankly. So bottom line is that your classroom visits really need to leverage what you're trying to accomplish as a school leader. And so I am going to steal a little strategy from Dr. Whitaker. Put a Y in the chat if you agree with that your classroom visits, if you leverage them correctly and really capitalize them, they can improve the quality of instruction in your school. Great. So that way I know you're with me. All right. So today I'll be sharing ideas and strategies to help you to build that clear classroom visit system. And what we'll do is I'm just going to kind of talk, I'll share things. And then at the very end, after Kevin goes, I want to make sure I don't take too much time. I'm going to stick right to my 30 and I'm watching the clock. Then at the very end, I'll hop into a breakout session if you have questions for me, if that would be helpful. Okay, so basically the main resource for my part of the session comes from the Coach Approach for School Leadership. That's the book that you'll see the picture of in the top corner. And I've also linked the slide deck to the resource page. And when you get to that, the link, that little picture is a link so you can get to that book. I came across this book in the P3 network, the Coach Approach to Principal Leadership cohort. And that's when we read the book as a book study and I got the cognitive coaching training. So huge shout out to that experience. It really helped me and changed my mindset around classroom visits. Okay, so why do you go into classrooms? Drop a reason in the chat box. What are your purposes? I'm not missing it. Oh, there is one. Thank you, Melissa. She's on our board. Support teachers, stay connected, help teachers stay in touch with what's going on. So for your learning, sounds like to know what's going on, to connect with people, mentor and support, guide the teachers. So lots, be around the students, connect, provide support, to get a snapshot of what and how the students are learning. All of those fit into what I would consider your three main purposes for getting into classrooms. Create connections, advance your instructional vision, and collect data. Getting clear on these three reasons for getting into classrooms helped me get into more classrooms and to make sure that the time that I was in the classrooms, I was fully present and that I was making the most of the time that I was in there. You guys were way too busy to be wasting our time. And I think understanding your purpose and being intentional and creating routines around why you're getting into classrooms, I found it to be very, very helpful to me. And I hope that it'll be helpful to you as well. So that's basically what we're going to talk about, these 3 reasons and how you can leverage the intentionality behind these to get into more classrooms and to do a better job. Okay, so the first purpose I'm going to talk about is to create connections. This is the one that I saw most probably in your chat box. This one is, basically this is your bucket fillers, right? You're just getting in there, you're making positive connections. These visits are either going to be, the purpose will be either neutral or positive, and you're just going in there to be visible, be in classrooms, talk to kids, maybe leave a positive note. Something that was a barrier to me is that really understanding that every time I went into a classroom, I didn't have to leave something or to notice something or to do a walkthrough, that I wanted to be intentional about just getting into a bunch of classrooms. And it seems obvious to say it now, but for some reason, I always felt like, okay, if I'm doing walkthroughs, I'm going to be doing walkthroughs and I need to be in there for 15 minutes. So when I really got clear on, okay, every day I'm going to do visits just for this purpose, it was very freeing to me. And I became better at doing these visits and doing just the regular walkthroughs as well. So thinking about, okay, that's, a barrier to me was thinking, okay, it's okay just to go in there for 5 minutes and get out. That's fine. What kind of barriers do you have for getting into classrooms? Put a barrier in or a challenge in the chat box. What prevents you from getting into classrooms? Pulled in different directions, discipline consuming your day, emergencies that pop up, discipline calls. Yes, very common, being pulled, meetings, office work, distractions. So when it comes to making those connections and getting into your classrooms to make connections, quantity trumps quality. And by that I mean it's like they say, you can't fill from an empty cup. And if you want to coach a teacher, they need to know that you're in their classroom to support them. It's not always going to be, what am I doing wrong now, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some tips and tools for trying to get into classrooms more so you can avoid some of those barriers or get past the barriers. Getting into classrooms is the easier part. The challenge is finding the time to have yes, I agree 100%. And Kevin has got some great tools for that. Okay, so let me first work on just getting into the classrooms. Okay. Whenever when I became a principal, I started listening to podcasts, right? And I was having some challenges of getting out of the office, right? I was getting pulled. And one of the things that I learned from listening to these podcasts and being like a voracious listener of anything related to leadership habits is that you want to automate what you want to create. If you want to create a habit for getting into classrooms, you need to have routines. So that's one of my biggest takeaways and biggest things to give you is this idea of creating a routine. So what I have found is that with my positive visits, with just getting into classrooms, with the ones I really just wanted to do a lot of, it was a great way to do that is to create a morning startup routine. And if you're interested in this concept, or if you have one and you want to improve yours, I put some resources there, real specific episodes. And then when you go to the slide deck, you'll get the link. But if you're interested in doing a morning startup routine, the first step I would say is just to get a little background about them, learn about them, That's step one. And those are your resources there. Step two is what you want to do is you want to create a routine of things you want to do or need to do every day, but you sometimes forget or don't do when things get crazy. I would find that the discipline issues, because I was the only principal, I didn't have an AP. The discipline issues, the parent calls, those kinds of things were urgent, and then they would get me pulled, and then I wouldn't leave time for the important, especially something like this where I thought, oh, I can do that later, right? So what I suggest is is to create this morning workday startup. Start your day with something positive, and for me, it was a positive walk through the school. And then to add activities that you do not do naturally but are important. I don't know what this says about me, but it wasn't natural for me just to go and make a pass through my school just to talk to my teachers as human beings. And I don't know what that means about me, but I always felt like, I don't know if you're like me or not, but I was like, I am at school to get a job done. And I'm going to, I don't have time to talk to people. I don't have time to do this, that. So I needed to create part of my routine every day was to walk around the school and just talk to teachers. And I would purposely talk to the ones that annoyed me, right? Because I was like, I needed to make that positive interaction. So basically, so what I'm saying to do now is for if you're thinking, okay, I need to get into more classrooms, I need to just do it first thing in the morning, right? Create your routine and think about and starting the day with a positive is a great way to get it off on the right foot. Okay, here was my morning workday startup. So the first thing I did every day was I completed 3 positive notes before I even walked around. So I'm in the building at 6:45. I write 3 positive notes to teachers. This is another way to get those bucket fillers. This was huge for me, y'all. Like I would say, oh, I'll just write some notes to teachers while I'm watching TV at night. Never did it. But if I just did 3 a day, every single teacher in my building and staff member would have at least 3 positive notes a semester. Then I would do a positive walk. This was like before the bell rings. The kids are coming into school, and I would just do a pass. And I would talk to the teachers in the hallways. And I would just be like, hey, what's up? We know what's going on. And then I would come back to the office. I'd kind of review my goals for the day. I would do a little visualization. I would plan what I'm going to do. Then I would read my email. The best thing to do is don't read your email first. Then I would have the other things I would forget to do, perfect attendance drawing, those kinds of things that I needed to do every day, but sometimes would forget. I'd go around do my birthday stickers for the kids. And then number 8's the thing I never did. I always said I was going to spend 20 minutes doing some professional reading. Never did it. Every once in a while, but I had the idea. But I'm just giving this as an example of how to create a routine, right? So this was my example of my workday startup. Now, as far as the classroom visits go, sometimes I would have the idea with being, I would just every hour, I would plan on getting up from whatever I was doing and just go into 3 classrooms. And that was like that kind of routine. I would set timers, whatever I needed to do, but then I would just get up and say, okay, I'll go see so-and-so. But part of what I did in step 3, when I was doing my goal review in step 4, I was planning who I was going to see that day to just drop in. Okay. So whether it's doing the positive visits or doing the walkthroughs, whatever it is, as far as that you're trying to automate, creating some kind of routine where you do the same things in the same order, it helped me immensely. That positive walk that I did, I got the idea from the leadership challenge with Rhonda Caldwell, KASA. She gave us 3 different, like 3 hearts. Anyone else do that? She gave us 3 hearts. You put them in your pocket. I did that. And that's how I would do my little visits. And then I would have a list in the office of all my teachers, and I would put a little check I made it. I made it. It sounds weird to say that you had to check off going to talk to people, but I had to do it. And that's what I did. One of the greatest things that I did that was the easiest for me on these connection creation visits, when I went into a classroom, sometimes I would be in there and like they would be doing something and I couldn't get to where like the desk was where you could leave a little positive note, or I just wanted to be really quick, or I had to step out for a minute and then you didn't want to have to go back in and disrupt. So I started taking my phone and I just would open up their text message, and then I would step out in the hall and then I would just tell them something. I would leave them one of those little voice things on the text message, and then I would send it to them. So they would hear my voice, they could hear my tone, they could hear me saying it, and it was really fast and easy. And doing all of this, being really intentional with this type of visit, helped me with my other two types. So again, I set goals for myself, 1 to 3 every hour or 10 a day. It depended on where I was in the context of the school year and how busy things were. Thursdays in the spring after 2 o'clock, I wasn't going to be doing them because I was going to be disciplining kids from fighting on the playground. So, you do what you can, right? But again, you go for quantity. Okay. The second type of classroom visit that I realized I really wanted to be intentional about was visits to advance the vision. Now, these were easy for me. These were the ones that I did very naturally. So I never had to really do a routine for these. But you could, if you felt like these are the ones that are hard for you, you could give yourself, goals and routines for these kinds of visits. But they're the ones when you think about really advancing your instructional initiatives. These are the ones where you go into the classroom and you're basically taking pictures of kids doing cool stuff, right? And the purpose of these is to support your superstars and highlight great instruction. And getting really clear on, I want to make sure that I do this so many times a week, helped me with just something very basic. It helped me with my weekly email, right? Do we all have a weekly email that we do or something, a weekly type of communication with your staff, and you like to do those shout outs? So being intentional with these helped me with that. It helped me to give my superstars the positives. They need you to know that you're noticing the great things that you're doing. So with these, I tried to target whatever it is we were working on. So at the beginning of the day, let's just say like one year we were really focused on co-teaching, right? So I would plan out, okay, I need to go to see this person doing math. I need to see this person doing reading because that's when I have my co-teachers in there. I want to make sure I take a picture of what they're doing, and then I'm going to find them doing something like this because I want to teach my teachers that blah, 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 blah. So that kind of thing. All right. So now we get to the really great part because I'm getting ready to transition to Kevin. So the walkthroughs. Now, this is what we traditionally think of as, okay, these are our classroom visits, right? And for me to know that, okay, I'm going to do these also, but it is good and it's okay to do the other kinds. But it's a completely different purpose. So what helped me is to think of, okay, my purpose in a walkthrough is to monitor instruction, to monitor something going on, and to collect data. And that is going to provide the foundation for that coaching of teachers. So something that I struggled with from the very beginning is I would have these complicated walkthrough instruments that were given to me by the district or from some other source, like EWalk. We had them on EWalk, we had it on Elliott, and I was trying to look for so many different things that I would just be doing this when I was in a classroom. Check. Okay, learning target, check. Okay, this is good engagement. Okay, we got this many kids doing this. And all I would do is be on my phone. I wouldn't be talking to kids. I wouldn't be paying attention to anything but my phone. So one of the ways around this that I found was through doing what I called focused walkthroughs. So it's giving yourself permission to focus on one thing. And when we get to him, he's going to give some really great tools for this. I'm going to show you an example of something I did just in my building by myself when I thought I can't look for everything anymore. So what I did was the year that we had our SACS accreditation, we were using the Elliott. And so I broke the Elliott down into I think there's like 5 different areas. And I would just look for different parts in different um, times of the year. And I just asked my district permission to do this. And they said, sure. Like I feel like in most cases, if you're like by yourself, if you're a building principal and you're trying to do the right thing and you have a good reason for it, you can talk to somebody. And if you can show them that you're doing something that's great for your building, they'll agree. They might even, like in my district in Garrett, they helped me make these different instruments by themselves so I could do it. So here's an example. At the beginning of the year, like in August, I would just be looking for like culture. I wanted to see classroom management strategies. Of course, high expectations were important. Of course, student engagement's important, but I just used it to move what I feel like was the most important at that time of year. So this is going to look really ugly, but because it's hard to get a picture of the actual instrument because it's all electronics. So this is a picture of the Google form that I made, and it's just the look fors I got from the Elliott. So you could make your own little Google forms, and if you have someone really smart like Mr. Bandura, then they can help you with doing autocrat and different things, the add-ons where you'll get it emailed to your teachers and they'll get immediate feedback. So just real simple. The less is more. And see, that's all it was. I didn't look for the learning target. I didn't look for anything else. I just looked for what the kids were doing. And that's what's great about Elliott is that it's all worded about learners do this, learn do that. And so it was all related to the classroom community and the culture. Now, I struggled a little bit with not looking for the learning target. Okay, because my philosophy is that congruence between target, standard, assessment, and what the kid's doing is so important, and it has to be going on because you can have a great classroom environment and you can have great student engagement, and so basically you have a very active, happy place, kids cognitive engaged, but if they're not cognitively engaged on the right thing, they're not going to get the results that you need them to, correct? So the way I balanced it out, when I always felt like congruence should always be a focus somehow. So I've done this 2 different ways. I had one walkthrough instrument that was just based on congruence. What's the learning target? What standard is this supposed to match? And those kinds of things. What are the students doing? What is their student work? And I had at the time I don't have an AP, so my school counselor would felt comfortable doing that for me, and she would go ahead and do that. So you could have somebody else doing that because it's just a recording and a check. But then I had another counselor who wasn't administratively focused. She didn't feel comfortable doing that. So the way I got around it, whoops, let me go back. Okay. Was I had my teachers do this, what I call the planning protocol. And so they basically would turn this into me every week. So, and this is from an elementary perspective. So basically I was most concerned with my elementary in their reading and their math targets and making sure that was congruent to the standards. So I would have them write down the standard, like usually there was a main comprehension standard of the week, there was a main math standard they would be focusing on. I wanted to make sure that their target was broken down in kid-friendly terms that matched, because at the time we didn't have a good curriculum document. And I also wanted my teachers, when I came into my building, they weren't doing common planning, and I wanted them to plan together and have these discussions together. So I asked them to fill this out when they were doing their common planning. So that way they would have the discussions together. They filled this out. They would just really briefly bullet points, what activities will they be doing? And then I wasn't too worried about that because I could see that when I went into the classrooms. And then I had them attach their formative assessment. So the teachers were required to do a main formative assessment, like an exit slip, each week for reading and each week for math. I called it like their formal formative assessment, so that we could look at student work. And the great thing that this did for me was that when they would turn this in, my goal, I thought, oh, we're going to have these deep, meaningful discussions at PLCs, right? Look at student work. Well, we couldn't do that. Sometimes they would bring student work, but I would be like, well, which standard is it? And they would be like, it was this one. And then they'd rattle off some number and we had to look it up, whatever. But this, it's all in front of you. You have it all together. So this helped me monitor congruency between standard target assessment. It helped me to have everything together when we did PLCs. Okay. And then that way, when you're in the classroom, you can focus on other things besides check-in. Okay. Now, in order to get the volume of these, right, the best thing I found to do was to set a goal and to track my goal. One of the greatest resources I found was Justin Bader. He had these classroom visit index cards, and they're so like non-techie, but they were like the coolest thing that I thought that helped me. I had my school secretary, their little index cards, she puts everybody's schedule on an index card. So every teacher has their own index card. On the front is their schedule with a check mark, and on the back or column for a check mark, and on the back are like some sentence stems, some coaching stems that you can use. And so I had all my index cards. I would pull 3 a day, because some days if I could get 3 walkthroughs in, it was a good day. I would pull 3 index cards, have them handy so that if I had a minute, I would know exactly where I was going. And that really helped, because if you're thinking, oh my gosh, you're dealing with discipline, you've got meetings, and then you have to decide where you're going, and you have to decide all this, it's not going to happen. But if it's automated, if you know where you're going when you have a minute, you just pick it up and go. On there with the schedule, if you're checking it off and you're tracking, then oh, I've seen Mr. Bandura teach math 6 days, the 6 out of the last 7 times I've been in there. I need to go see something else. That kind of thing. Also, it helped me to make sure I got to my specials teachers, because if you're like me, they're the ones that don't get the love because you've got priorities, right? So it helps you track where you've been. So that's another little helpful resource you can check out. Now, this is where I'm gonna start transitioning. I think I did it exactly almost 30 minutes, so I tried really hard. I can't say enough about cognitive coaching, the coach approach to school leadership. I think in May is when the P3 will be taking applications if they're doing a next cohort group for this, and I really highly recommend it. Somebody in the chat box mentioned the challenge of finding the time to have the conversation and the feedback. This is going to sound really odd, or maybe it won't, but the best times I found were after my minis. Like, it's kind of odd because you've got evaluation purposes and then you've got coaching purposes, right? How do you balance those? Well, what I found is that I always felt bad about taking, with like taking a teacher's time and like, okay, I'm going to do a walkthrough and then I want you to meet with me tomorrow so I can tell you all the ways that I want you to grow, right? So I would be like looking at my walkthroughs and all those times as collecting evidence. And then when I would have those minis, and I'd have the 20 minutes, the post observation conference, I would just be very clear. And this is something that they tell you in that book. They say you just be very clear, and you say, I'm going to be putting my coach hat on right now, and I'd like to ask you some questions about, and give you some feedback about this particular strategy. Tell me about it. And then you would, you say, okay, now I'm going to switch hats here. I'm going to put my evaluation hat on. This is where you fall on the rubric. So you just be very clear. You just split your time, and you just split your time for coaching. You split your time for evaluation. Now, Kevin's going to have some really great ways to do this coaching within the context of giving of of walkthrough instruments, I guess you could say, right? And some coaching notebooks and things like that. But I didn't have access to those at the time. I wish I did. But that's what I did. I would use my my post observation conferences for that. And what I have found was with my superstars, right? Your best teachers, they need to know that they earned their A up front. So with them, lots of times I would say, here you, would you quit worrying about everything? This is where you are in the rubric. You are accomplished. You're doing great. Okay. So now this is, and then so that's my evaluator hat. Now I'm going to switch hats and I'm going to put my coach hat on. All right. You wanted me to be looking for how many students were doing this in your classroom when I observed. This is the data I found, and let's have a coaching moment on that. So that's how I would handle them. Now with teachers that had a lot of room to grow, sometimes I flip-flopped, okay? Because I felt like I wanted to give them some evidence why they were developing on the rubric. So I would say, those are, I would have, okay, so this is, first I'm going to put my evaluator hat on for you, and I'm going to, or excuse me, my coaching hat, and say, you had this many students doing this, and, what were you planning, why did you plan this activity the way it was, and blah, blah, blah. And then I would say, okay, now we're going to switch to the evaluator hat. And this is why you are at this level on the rubric. So I hope that was helpful to kind of set the foundation for all the awesome stuff you're getting ready to hear. And these are on the last slide are links to the resources. Again, it's hooked into the little sheet that goes with our presentation. And you'll see the link to the website for the P3 program. I've got a little blog. I even started a podcast this week. So there you go. Now I'm done. Go, Kevin.
Thanks, Liz. That's a lot of great tools in there, and your perspective of how you implemented that as a principal is really something that I know I feel like a lot of our participants today are facing some of the same struggles that you had when you were in that principal role. And what I'd like to do, I look back at the chat at some of the things that people said were barriers to getting in classrooms. And Liz, if you'll stop sharing so I can share my screen. But one of the things that you all said over and over again is time. And I want to highlight this one. Getting in the classroom is the easier part. The challenge is finding the time to have the conversation for the feedback. And so what I'm hoping to do is give you some tools that will allow that to be more efficient. So I have 3 learning intentions for today. Learning intention 1, we want to know the components of a robust feedback and coaching system, determine the impact of that feedback and coaching system. And then also I want you to learn about some tools that'll make it more efficient and more effective. So just in the chat, if you'll drop, what are the components of quality feedback and what are the components of quality coaching? And I'll give you a couple minutes for that. So a lot of you all are hitting on some of those very those things that are definitely part of quality feedback, getting in concise, specific, immediate, and so you guys are right on with this. Feedback should be immediate, should be specific, and I want to highlight the work of Mike Rutherford here and his tool, the 30-second feedback tool, which provides a structure for leaders to provide feedback to their teachers in order to make it immediate, to make it specific. He argues, or his point is that this feedback should be strength-based and anchored in a common language. Mike also has the artisan themes, which is an excellent language to anchor your feedback in. And it's a really good, a good language for that. I've used that before. I've used some other things. If you're not familiar with that, you might have something going on in your school, whether it's thoughtful classroom or something like that, where you have a language where you want to anchor this feedback. But the tool that Mike has for 30-second feedback has 4 parts to it. It has a cushion, a teaching move, the effect on learning, and then a positive tag. So if this were something that you were doing face-to-face, the cushion is something brief like, hey, thanks for letting me in your classroom today. I really enjoyed being in there. The middle part of this, the teaching move and the effect on learning, is really where the magic happens with this 30-second feedback. The teaching move is where you identify a very specific thing that they did in their classroom. And then the effect on learning is, what did that teacher move do to impact student achievement or impact student learning? And for example, you might say to a teacher, when you asked a question and you paused and you told your students to turn and talk, and you gave them an opportunity to really process their answer before you called on somebody. That's a really great teacher move. And what that's called is the power of pause, and it gives all students, an opportunity to process the content deeply. And then the last part of this is the positive tag, where you say, hey, keep it up. The purpose of 30-second feedback is for us to identify those really good teacher moves, strengths that teachers have that sometimes they're not even aware that they have them, the impact that it has on student learning. We want teachers to continue to do those things and even improve upon those. And sometimes just making a teacher aware of something that they're really good at will reinforce that behavior and hopefully get them to continue to do that more. So part of this delivering this 30-second feedback is it could be face-to-face, and it could go something like what I had just described a minute ago with that power of pause. It could be a handwritten note, or it could be within an email. And these are all systems that I think you've probably used along the way, or you've heard about along the way, people leaving Post-it notes or postcards or delivering an email. But I go back to that statement a minute ago that was in the chat. Getting in the classrooms is the easier part. The difficult part is finding the time to have those conversations, or to write that handwritten note, or to send that email. And that's where this part of the system comes in. So I've developed a classroom visit tool, and part 1 of this, it's a really big, robust tool, but part 1 is for 30-second feedback. It will deliver a certificate to a teacher via email as soon as you submit a Google form. And so it makes it really, really efficient. And I'll show you a little bit of the Google form here in a minute. But as you all know, once you submit a Google form, it will populate a spreadsheet. Once it gets populated to a spreadsheet, then that's where all the magic happens. The tool that I use to deliver, and this is just an example of what part of the spreadsheet looks like from our Google form. I created a Google slide that's basically a template. And if you'll notice within here, you see these less than and greater than signs. And for those of you that are familiar with mail merge, this is how this works. It populates the spreadsheet. These fields that are within this Google slide are the titles that come from the spreadsheet, column titles. And so because we put it in those symbols, it will pull from that. And so every time we click submit in our form, a teacher gets an email, and it gets this certificate attached as a PDF. And I'll show you what it looks like here in just a minute. But the extension that I use for this is called Autocrat. Autocrat is what helps take something from a spreadsheet. It can attach a document to an email, and it happens automatically. So as soon as you click submit on that, and you walk out of the room, that teacher already has an email with the certificate, and it looks something like this. The email populates with this message. It's got the cushion. Thank you for allowing me to visit your classroom today. Please see the attached PDF for some additional feedback. This is where the teacher move and the impact on student learning is communicated to the teacher. And so our Google form, we use thoughtful classroom indicators for our quote teacher moves. And so from Cornerstone 2, incorporate student interest. And in this particular one, I made a comment about what the teacher did, the lesson that they had prepared, and then the impact that it has on student learning. And then it also ends with that positive tag. So a teacher gets this email, they can look at it on their own time. They can go back and read this certificate and process, here's what I did as a teacher, and here's the impact that it had on student learning. And so even in a face-to-face conversation, sometimes you'll catch a teacher and you're trying to have a really brief 30-second conversation while they're on their way to the restroom, or while they're walking their students to the cafeteria, or in between classes. And it's nice in the moment, but that teacher is on a cognitive load as they've got another group of students entering their room, or they're transitioning to the next thing. And so sometimes that just kind of washes over them and it feels good in the moment, but I don't know how long it sticks. This is something that they can go back to and they can reread when they have time to sit down and actually breathe during the day. So that's kind of part one of the tool that provides the 30-second feedback. So I just kind of popped this in here. We surveyed our teachers. Actually, the survey is still open, so this is very fresh responses from our teachers. And you can see what this system that we've implemented has already done for them. And just a couple of them, it's great to feel appreciated. I love having admin faces in my room. Definitely a confidence booster. In almost 22 years of teaching, first time I feel like people are coming into my room and they're looking to help me. So that's some of the feedback that we're getting on the system that we're implementing. So that's part one. Part two, still part of the same Google form, is that we are, and this is still in progress for us, we're not ready for this yet, but this is what's coming down the pike, is that we're going to provide feedback for that individual teacher based on their professional growth plan. So every year, teachers fill out a growth plan. I don't know if you were like me as a classroom teacher. For most of the time when I did that, it was a compliance piece. So what we want to do is move that from compliance to something that actually informs their instruction and helps them grow. So what we're going to require is that at least one of their growth areas comes from domain 2 or domain 3 from the Danielson framework. And then when we visit classrooms, not in the evaluation, but within this walkthrough, this informal class visit, we're going to be able to view their lesson or that snapshot of a lesson through the lens of their growth area. And we're just going to provide feedback. We're going to collect that data and we're going to use that data whenever we have a discussion with them in a coaching discussion. This is not going to be immediately shared with the teacher, although this information will be collected and curated in what I'm calling a coaching notebook. And I'll show you that in just a minute as well. So part one is the 30-second feedback. When we click submit on this Google form, they get the email, they get that certificate, and they get that immediate, specific, and strength-based feedback. Part two, this kind of gets put behind the scenes and it gets collected into a coaching notebook. So it might look something like this. If a teacher had selected, for example, 3B, they've selected questioning and discussion techniques. These are the 3 things that go in the Danielson framework. As an observer, I'm just going to jot down some notes on any or all of this. I'm only in there for 10 to 15 minutes. I may not be able to comment on all of it, but I could just basically make some notes that I think will inform a coaching conversation later. All right, so I've talked for a little bit. Let me give you a chance to drop some things in the chat here. What is the potential impact of a feedback and coaching system that includes a teacher's individual PGP? So a lot of great things in here. Make meaningful connections to what they specifically want to grow in, makes the PGP valuable. It's not just a compliance piece as well. Greater buy-in to the feedback. And again, I like this, keeps the PGP as in the forefront throughout the year. So it's not just something that they see and they do at the beginning, they put it to the side, and then sometime in March, you squeeze in an evaluation cycle on them, and you bring those back up. So the tool can help with making those things happen. Okay, part 3, the school focus. Now, this is entirely up to you, your instructional team, however you want to do this. I prefer to have somewhat of a shared vision on this, but what is it that you want to look for in the school focus? This could change every 4 to 9 weeks. So I was thinking about it. This might be something we focus on every month. It changes, or might be all the way up to a quarter, but it depends on the time of year. It could be tied to school initiatives. For example, you might start the beginning of the year looking for different things related to how are teachers relating to students. What are the relationship building? What are the rules and organizational and procedural things that they're putting in place? Month 2 might be questioning. Are my teachers providing students with an opportunity to respond? Or are they allowing call outs? Are they calling on volunteers? It might be, is the lesson congruent to the learning target, like Liz was talking about earlier? Whatever the school decides is the focus, this can also be part of the same walkthrough or observation or learning walk visit tool. This is also not shared immediately with the teacher, and this gets curated in the coaching notebook as well. So, for example, one of the things that we're collecting data on right now is questioning. How effective are our teachers' questions? Are they providing opportunities for students to respond? Are the questions just simply recall, or are they getting into some higher order thinking? And so we use a little system where we have a statement here about questioning, and then we fully observed it, we partially observed it, we didn't observe it, and the teacher really missed an opportunity here. Or perhaps in this snapshot, this really wasn't a time for us to see that. So we record that we didn't observe it, but there really wasn't an opportunity. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just tells us that in that snapshot, we didn't have the opportunity to view maybe what we're looking for. Sometimes with learning targets, if you're not there at the beginning of the class, the learning target was discussed and implemented really, really well, but we weren't there to see it. So that could be an opportunity for that. But again, this is the school focus. It's really, what is it that you want to see as a school? All right, so there's 3 parts to the walkthrough tool. Now we get to the coaching notebook. So the coaching notebook, through the magic of spreadsheets, every teacher has an individual spreadsheet. So again, I have one Google form. When I click submit, here's what happens. Teacher gets 30-second feedback with the email and the certificate. Collect data on that teacher's individual PGP and evidence or I guess commentary on their specifically chosen PGP growth area. Third thing that happens is we collect data on the school focus. Are we looking at learning targets? Are we looking at questioning? What are the things that we're interested in this moment from a school focus? When I hit submit, all that data gets curated, gets collected into that one master spreadsheet. And what we're able to do with the coaching notebook is sort that and pull it into an individual teacher's spreadsheet, so that as a coach or as an administrator, I can pull up that teacher spreadsheet and I can view every walkthrough, all the information that's been collected every time that teacher gets a walkthrough. So it looks something like this. Are you all able to see the notebook, the spreadsheet, or do I need to?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So if you look down here at the tabs, these are different tabs, and this is an example of just some kind of drive-bys that we did, not actual. We were just kind of testing the tool. But I have different tabs down here. The first one is all the 30-second feedback. The second one is the school focus. And then the third tab, just general observations that we make every time we go into a classroom. So now, as a coach, I'm able to view this particular teacher, and it's a profile of this. And so the analogy that I've been giving my admin is like, when I go to the doctor, I might not see my doctor. I might see a nurse practitioner. My doctor might be on vacation, and I see someone who's filling in for him or her. But they know me when I walk in because they're able to pull up my file, and they can see what medications am I on, what are the health issues that I've had, all of those things, and they're informed before they even come and see me. This is kind of the same thing. If I'm going to go do a walkthrough of a teacher, I can look back and see, what are other people seeing? What are the strengths that this teacher is demonstrating? Where do I see areas of growth? And it informs my walkthrough as I walk in, and I get to actually know this teacher as a teacher. Oh, I'm going to have to go back and share again. Okay, so what impact, if you'll put this in the chat, what impact would the coaching notebook have on instruction in your school? So one of the things I see here is about having all the data in one place. Yeah, that's the thing that's really nice, is it's all at your fingertips. And the best part about it is it all happens on one click of submit on a Google form, that all of this stuff goes. You don't have to go back and retype things or copy and paste or whatever. It's all there on one click, and it happens through a couple of different formulas that are in that spreadsheet, a filter and an import range. Those are the two formulas that if you learn something about those two, it can help you kind of set up that whole system. So that's kind of a discussion for another time. That's really more of a workshop, where if you were to come in with your walkthrough instrument already in place, that, you know, we could go through and set up the coaching notebook, and I'd be willing to do that at some point when you get to that stage, if you're ready for that and you want that to happen. All right, so last couple of things. To kind of help with the organization, Liz gave you some really great tools to keep yourself organized so that you get in the classroom. And the biggest thing is carving out the time. So one thing that we're using here in Frankfurt at both our schools, we have a spreadsheet. We have an instructional team that goes to visit. And so I just have a spreadsheet where I have the teachers' names down the side. And then I assign all of the people that are on our instructional team for a given week. These are the people that you need to go see. And you can see when they finish, they just click the checkbox. And so they know going into that week, I've got a handful of walkthroughs that I need to complete this week. If everybody does their part, then every teacher gets at least one walkthrough every week. And so all of these instructional touches start to add up. So that's just kind of what the spreadsheet that I use here. There is some, no, I don't want to go to that yet. I am collecting some statistics on this, and I can see how our walkthrough, how our instructional teams are performing. If they're able to get into those classrooms, I can also see the teachers, their scheduled visits, how many times they're getting visited, and then if they're getting visited. And so, for example, this is week 5 that we've implemented this. And in our Second Street school, we're at 148 instructional touches, and at our high school, we're at 92. So, we're well over almost 250 walkthroughs that we've done in just 5 weeks. And keep in mind, that's also the same 5 weeks that were the 2 weeks before Christmas break and then 3 weeks after Christmas break. So when elementary schools are really, really busy, we're still getting in the classrooms to see that. So that's where we are at this point. So another level of this, and I'm getting ready to implement this, is I'm going to reward our instructional staff by giving them a certificate and some badges for whenever they start to complete their walkthroughs. So the first badge that they can earn is called the Tadpole badge, and is if they are able to complete their checklist for 1 week, then they're going to get this badge. If they do 3 weeks, then they get the trifecta badge. When they get to 5 weeks, they get the Kobe Bryant badge. When they get to 10 weeks, they get the strike badge. When they have provided 30-second feedback for the same teacher more than once, they get the double down badge. And then once they observe everybody in the school, they get the Santa Claus badge because they've checked everybody off their list. So I'm hoping that this is going to help motivate our staff members, our instructional team. We all like to get stickers. And so that's where I kind of thought that they could earn badges, just like if it was a couch to 5K, they're going to earn this, I guess, couch to coaching badge. All right. So I'm kind of at the end of this at this point. So I wanted to go back and kind of revisit the purpose and then learning intentions for today. So components of a robust feedback and coaching system. You all nailed that when we talked about how it was specific, and the feedback should be specific, should be immediate, it should be strength-based, and then also looking at some of those tools as well to make that more efficient. Learning attention to the impact of this, and you all talked about this, and Liz really set the table for this. One thing that I keep telling people is that I don't know if you all have the same issue that we do, that it's very difficult to find teachers. Like, we are not going to hire our way into proficiency. We have to provide feedback and coaching for the teachers that you have. And teaching has never been more difficult. COVID has made things really difficult. Even on the backside of COVID, things are much more difficult than they ever were. We have to know, our teachers have to know that we see them, that we value them, that we're here to support them. And that's really the impact of having that robust feedback and coaching system. And then the third, I hope that you learned a little bit today about the tools, about the Google form, the spreadsheet. I know we didn't get into actually creating them, but I'm hopeful that maybe you can see my example of how that's being implemented, and then that will help you figure out or find those people that are in your district that are really good at spreadsheets, that can help you develop your own system.
Can you show that notebook again? A couple of people in the chat asked to see
Sure
it.
thing.
If you don't care.
Actually, let me pull up a notebook that we have, because that one's kind of contrived a little bit. Okay, and I'm gonna just hide the teacher name so this is a spreadsheet for a teacher, and we have 3 different areas that we're looking for right now. The cornerstones, that's our common language, that's from Thoughtful Classroom, and that's something that, again, this is really up to you. You could use the Mike Rutherford artisan themes here, but this is our common language for our good teacher moves. So when I pull up this particular teacher's notebook, I can see that she's been observed 3 different times. These are the teacher moves that were witnessed. And then this was what we saw in those, the impact that, what did she do as a teacher and what impact did it have on instruction or on achievement? I also sort it into the questioning. So we can look at how this teacher may have performed with that. And then also general observations, we just make notes of that. So it's really just one teacher. It's every teacher has their own spreadsheet. So once a form is submitted, it populates the response sheet. From there, the response sheet, it gets separated into all the teacher tabs, and then I pull it from there into this notebook. But really, I just have kind of a folder of every teacher has their own notebook. And so every one of these teachers has their own notebook. It gets populated from that spreadsheet. Just trying to pull up. Let me pull up the actual spreadsheet. So can you all see these tabs down at the bottom? So this is the response that gets populated, or this is the tab that gets populated every time the form is submitted. So I use the, I just pull some things from that other tab, only the things that I want to see from, like, for example, these are only the things that are related to the cornerstones. This tab only pulls things that are related to questioning. This tab only pulls things that are related to those general observations that we make. And this is where we can talk about how, maybe some next steps for that teacher. Then once I do that, then I pull it into, it gets sorted. The function that we want to use here is filter. And what this does is this will look, for example, this will look in a particular tab. It'll find that teacher's name, and then it pulls whatever was available for that. So every teacher has their own tab from this, and then that gets pulled into that different, into its own spreadsheet, so that people that are doing the Google form, if they're only looking at these particular things, they're view only and they can't mess anything up. So I'm the only one that has access to that original spreadsheet. So the first thing, it gets filtered into a particular teacher tab, and then import range from there into a new tab. I feel like that's really technical, and that would be something for another conversation. That's all that I have. The only thing else that I have is, if you are able to, if you would quickly, or at some point, give me some feedback on the presentation. There's a bit.ly there. There's also a QR code, and I know you all have. Thanks, Liz, for dropping that in the chat. The slide show is in there as well. So if you get a chance to give me some feedback on that, I would appreciate it. But Liz, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. I was typing your your address in the chat here. Do you guys have any questions for us about anything? Anything we can answer for you? I think I got that right, Kevin, for you, the bit.ly. I tell you what, those tools are just awesome. So totally wish I had had those. Did Kelly, can you see it? Did you see the bit.ly there?
I think she's asking about the presentation,
Oh.
and you dropped that earlier, I think, in the chat, did you not? Or was
I'll
that
drop
just
it in.
your
I'll
link?
drop it in
Oh,
right
okay,
now as
great.
well.
Yeah.
I didn't know if they were connected or not. Thank you.
Let me see.
Yeah, and the bit.ly is actually at the end of that too for the feedback, but there's the presentation. And I'm certainly open if anybody wants to, like, feels like they want to go down this road and you want some help to create that book, the notebooks or whatever, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to set aside some time. And if we get enough people, we may even do some kind of mass thing. I'm actually going to would like for more people to use this kind of tool and get some feedback on how we can even improve it.
I was going to add, I think Liz and Kevin, the slide decks will get linked in the grid too with the recording. Okay, I just want to make sure people knew that they'd be able to access them after the chat was closed as well.
Yeah, if you go to the little sheet, like if you go to the grid and then click on ours, you'll go to our little sheet, and then my slide deck's in there. And then Kevin, you could probably, if yours isn't in there, you can put, is yours in there?
Yeah, mine's in there as well.
Yeah, so you can get it that way too.
Yep, they're both there.
Yep. Well, I hope this was helpful. It seemed like it fit well together. I think we had a
Yeah,
tag team.
thank you guys so much. We've got about 3 minutes left, I'll say, and the next session will start at 12:40. Kevin and Liz, thank you so much for sharing those tools and those ideas and your approach. I really appreciate your time today. Again, the next session will be at 12:40, and that is Mike Rutherford. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for being with us today. Kevin, I don't know if you can see that question from Ellen about the
Yeah, I was just getting ready to
Okay.
if Ellen's still on here, the notebook is actually just a Google sheet. That it's the formulas that you use are filter. So I take the spreadsheet that gets the responses from the original Google form. I use the filter function to create a tab for each teacher. And then I just open up a new spreadsheet, name it for that teacher, and import range will pull from that other one. Yeah. Autocrat is the extension that I use to create the certificate and also send the email. So
Thanks so much.
All right.
Awesome.
I click recording in this session again.